I'm caught up in the whirlwind. Seems what we had never really was. Maybe it's raining outside. All the tears that we cried, you could bottle them up, fill up an ocean. Real love ain't really like this. No second guessing, no bittersweet. So why waste any more of our time working so hard to be just alright? No, real love ain't really this hard. You can't tame to run away hard. It's about time we let this go. We've held on so long. Oh, the good Lord knows real love ain't really like this, no. I know I've caused you heartache. Yeah, we felt the pain. You can call me a liar, but baby, we're expired. There's nothing here to say. There's someone for everyone. I know yours is out there. I've loved you all I know how. We've been living on a prayer, and you know that real love ain't really like this. No second guessing, no bittersweet. So why waste any more of our time working so hard to be just alright? Real love ain't really this hard. You can't tame to run away hard. It's about time we let this go. We've held on too long. Oh, the good Lord knows.
Hi, this is Val Von Torn of Metatron Power and Light. You're listening to Gary Anderson and Night Dreams Talk Radio.
Coming to you from the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network newsroom, I'm Guy Ticker with the strange news. Epic quest to build a permanent moon base. The handful of astronauts who have set foot on the moon spent as little as 1 day on the surface. How do you build a settlement on the moon? The goal is to build systems that would be capable of month-long or better excursions. But the longer you stay, the riskier it gets. I'm Guy Ticker. The strange news is brought to you by Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Do you have a strange story? Contact us at nightdreamstalkradio.com. At AaronJudkins.com, there's a question. Who are the guardians of Göbekli? Göbekli Tepe, one of the most puzzling archaeological sites of the Stone Age. It is considered the oldest pre-pottery Neolithic site ever discovered. This mysterious site is changing our perception of the Neolithic, a time period just after the Younger Dryas event. Is there a connection to the heavens and the gods? Do its symbols represent the earliest known language? It's the paradigm that's changing the paradigm. Who are these guardians of Göbekli? Get the new book and find out. Guardians of Gobekli at www.aaronjudkins.com. The Archive Project. We need all government, military, and government contractor witnesses to contact Dr. Greer ASAP at info@SeriousDisclosure.com. That email address again is info@SeriousDisclosure.com. Dr. Greer is archiving his vast trove of documents, witnesses, and UFO cases so they can be shared and give a clear picture of the UFO subject to end the secrecy and establish interplanetary peace. Please join us for our DC conference June 10th through June 12th and support us with your donations by going to this website, www.SeriousDisclosure.com. That's SeriousDisclosure.com, spelled SIRIUSDISCLOSURE, SeriousDisclosure.com. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
Well, coming to you from beautiful Gig Harbor, Washington. I hope everybody's had a great week so far. We got a lot of shows lined up this week that are going to be fantastic. Tonight, we're going to talk about John Keel with a great guest, Brent Raynes, in a few minutes. JC, how have you been, my friend?
I've been doing good. Can't complain. One of these days, I'm going to wake up and it's going to be spring, Gary, and I won't know how to act.
The older you get, the faster it comes. I'll tell you that. I mean, I think time warp is all dependent in time, and all that depends on your age. When you're a kid, right, you're like in first grade. You can't wait to be in second grade, and it takes forever to get into second grade. When you hit your 70s, I'll tell you what, a year flies by like you know what. Well, you know what? The Pentagon keeps coming out with this garbage, or somebody down at the Pentagon is. Now they're saying aliens might have already landed on Earth, said a Pentagon, a secret source.
Yeah, I think it's these little seeds that they're planting. Like, well, even Dr. Greer was kind of mentioning that kind of stuff too. But you know what? Listen, they're never going to really come out and say anything. They plant these little seeds, these motherships and everything. And listen, if they want, like he said, if they want to get rid of us or invade, they just flick a switch.
No, they might just get tired of it and push that button like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You know, the Earth was in the way of the superhighway of the universe. Push, gone. You know, another thing, they're saying that growing human body parts is going to be the near future. They also have said in the news, science news, that they're just a few years away from taking a person's average lifespan in the 70s, 80s to 140, 160. Why does that happen when I'm 71?
I seen that. They word immortality, you know, but yeah, what's that going to do for the world population? That's going to be 10 million here, not too long. It's going to be, we're going to be overflowing with people.
Well, can you imagine? You're in a jacuzzi. You're in a, beautiful one, but not the type you step into. This is one that's ground level. You have a beautiful model with you. You're in this. The water is bubbling. You're drinking wine, champagne, and all of a sudden a mountain lion grabs your head and decides, you're going to be my meal.
Wow, that would be horrible. That reminded me of that video where the alligator jumped in the pool when somebody was in there and got the woman, but that would be awful, Gary.
That's not my favorite way to have head, I'll tell you that. I'd say I have a mountain lion grab your head. You know how much beard that would be? Not for the mountain lion, but here you are. You got other things on your mind, and all of a sudden, that's why I would never have one that's ground level. I'm surprised you didn't say bear. That's going to be the next one, the bear, because you know how these bears have been encroaching on people anyway. Oh, yeah. Well, in the news, again, they're talking about, cattle mutilation in the 70s. You know, they're kind of whitewashing the 70s of all the different reports, like missing organs, drained of blood. What happened to the thousands of cows in the 70s that this has happened to? No, it's not dozens. It literally, according to this article, there was over 1,000 of them.
Yeah. It's funny you mention it because I seen a documentary where an inside whistleblower said it was some of these aliens. They would get these parts and rub all over their body because that's the way they eat.
Yeah, well, then again, some people say it's different, everything from whatever critters out there, that, these cattle die. But, again, that one famous pathologist in that case 2 years ago in Oregon said whatever happened to this cow, it happened while it was standing.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't buy, some of this stuff. I don't know. Well,
Right.
Also in the news, there's a new fungal infection that's going across America. If you thought COVID was bad, this is way worse than COVID ever could be.
So it sounds like another thing that we got to worry about. Where these things keep coming from, Gary?
I don't know. They said this was the fungal, and what it does when you get infected with this, the odds are survival is like that.
Oh boy, great. Yeah, that's just what we need. Another fungus thing coming out. Great.
Did you hear about? I won't mention the brand of the eye drops, but there is a major brand of eye drops that there's a recall. People have been going blind using it.
I seen that, and wasn't there even a couple deaths? Now I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, there's been a couple deaths. Yeah.
Okay, there was. Yeah. Can you imagine just, hey, you need a couple eye drops. Next thing you know, you lose your eye, or God forbid you die. That's ridiculous.
It's crazy. You think when you buy this stuff, it's, I don't know. Well, now they're talking about war and civil unrest if the banks start collapsing.
Oh boy, that's already started a month ago with a couple banks. Remember, you talked about
you're talking about a week or so ago,
or a week ago. Yeah.
Well, they're going to shore up banks where that doesn't happen, but they raised the interest rate up another 0.25% today.
Oh boy, that's just lovely too. Listen, these are all the signs. These little seeds are all planting of the times.
Well, the average person, how do they survive nowadays?
Especially on the east and west coast where you're at. The cost of living's through the roof.
Well, like I told you, that on the west coast, okay, in the Seattle area, if you make $100,000 in the Seattle area, it's like where you are in Ohio, making $40,000.
Oh yeah.
So your $40,000 is going to go as far as my $100,000 up here in the Seattle area.
Right, and it's true. I mean, look at the gas prices, everything. It all matches the incomes.
That's why you have a lot of sons and a hose and a can.
That's right. Like the guy had the gas station in his backyard.
Oh yeah. We'll be right back with our guest here tonight. You're listening to, well, naturally, Night Dreams Talk Radio. Check out our website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. By the way, when we had Dr. Stephen Greer on, we had over 7.25 million downloads just from his being on. That's crazy.
Take a journey of adventure and discovery for the enigmatic giants of the forests. Read On the Trail of Bigfoot by Mike Dupler. The author himself describes it this way.
Having found possible Sasquatch evidence, namely trees driven into the ground upside down, thought to be territory markers, led me to investigate this creature in my native Ohio. Several years and many forays into Bigfoot territory, I have found incredible evidence, which inspired my book, On the Trail of Bigfoot. Bigfoot is alive and has many fantastic abilities. The evidence is out there for all to see, but you need to know what to look for. My book will inspire those who have answered the call to seek this elusive creature, the Bigfoot. The truth is out there.
Read On the Trail of Bigfoot by Mike Dupler. Available now at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and IndieBound.org.
Hi, this is Val Von Torn of Metatron Power and Light. You're listening to Gary Anderson and Night Dreams Talk Radio.
And we are back. JC, tell the listeners about our great guest tonight.
Well, our great guest tonight is Brent Raynes. Now, he is an editor of Alternate Perceptions Online magazine. Now, he is also an author who has been researching the UFO phenomena and other, well, strange phenomena for more than 56 years, not just in the U.S., but also Canada.
Well, Brent, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Well, Gary, I'm doing pretty good. Thank you. Everything is, moving along. Keep busy with the magazine. Comes out, of course, the first of each month, and we just reached our 300 issue. We were originally a print magazine back in 1985, 4 pages, and then a co-editor and helped me with publishing, Dr. Greg Little, who also lives here in Tennessee, is an author and a psychologist. And in 1993, he came on board, and we started printing a very quality magazine. Toward the end of it, we got up to about 56, 58 pages, color cover. In fact, I happen to have a copy right here of one of our last in 2001 issues. And we were going along quite well, but we decided that everything was going to the internet, so that's where we ended up. So here we are. It's free, and we have interview features and articles and book reviews and so on, and the issues are also archived going back quite a number of years.
Well, it's sad to say that print is gone pretty much. I mean, newspapers, try to find a newspaper, they're online, nothing like, I used to enjoy reading the newspaper and taking an hour or two to read it. I mean, you go online now, you read it in a few minutes and it's over with. It doesn't have the same impact. And I couldn't wait to get a hold of, like magazines and stuff and read them, and absorb it. And, I guess maybe that's a time of what we're going to. It's just, it's a shame that, that we're headed this way.
Yeah, I agree. I still enjoy, having a book in my hands to read. And I miss being able to go to the back of it there, that blank page where I can put, things that really stand out to me and write the page number and where to go to look up something, that I found interesting. You can't, can't do all that with digital materials.
No, you can't. What got you into UFOs?
Well, I was as a young man, I was always interested in the possibility of life out there. I was even interested in dinosaurs. I was kind of a geek, I guess. Still am. But in 1966 in March, there were the sightings out in Michigan, college students and other people seeing strange objects, lights in the sky, and it made national news, I guess probably international. And that was when Dr. Hynek, who was a consultant to the Air Force in astronomy, had Project Blue Book going on in the Air Force. That was the name of the project that investigated UFOs. And he had suggested some of the sightings might have been swamp gas, and of course, a lot of people thought that's ridiculous, and created quite a storm. He didn't, he got kind of misquoted where, years later he was trying to explain that I didn't say they all were swamp gas. It's just that some of the activity made him think it was possibly swamp gas. But anyway, I mean, in Maine, March of '66, we had a guy, John King, up in Bangor, Maine. I'm originally from Maine. And he had seen an object just like a foot over the ground. It looked metallic. It had a dome on top, I think. And he had a handgun, and he fired at it, heard pings coming off of the what sounded like was a metallic surface, and contacted the police. And that was in the papers. And so, and I remember looking at the sky and, hoping to see something, but I wasn't going to get involved at the time until late in '66. I read a book by Frank Edwards, kind of Flying Saucers, Serious Business, and it had details about police officers and pilots and even an astronomer seeing these things. And so in January 1967, I started clipping stories out of the paper and reading books and magazines, and I soon became what I later learned was a ufologist, And I started even calling people up on the phone. And, back in those days, you could get on the phone and call someplace across country and talk to a real person, and they would help connect you with someone and give you a phone number, maybe an address where you could write them, and I started writing other people in the UFO field that I read in magazines and things. Anything I could, reach out and connect with people. I got very interested, and within a couple of years, I had my own mimeograph newsletter called Scientific Sauceritis Review.
Well,
anyway,
what made you, Brent, how did you come up with that name, out of curiosity?
The sauceritis part, it was in I think this was, I was going through these microfiche newspaper files, and I went back to 1947 and 1966, and also like 1896, 1897, back when there were the mysterious airships that no one ever identified either. And so anyway, in 1947 period, there was somebody, I think it might have been a psychologist, who said it was like a disease of the mind, and he called it sauceritis. So I thought, hey, I'm going to use that as a title for, a mimeograph newsletter. So I did. And so from about 1969 till about 1971 or 72, I was putting out this newsletter. I was actually quite a number of people who were quite prominent in the field. John Keel became kind of like a reader, and we would exchange publications. He had one called Anomaly, and Gray Barker, and even Lauren Coleman of cryptozoology fame, and then some others that I don't think anybody would know, but they were out there and interested in all this stuff at the time. So I was involved at at an early age. As a teenager, I thought this stuff was like, it went back to 1947. The Kenneth Arnold sighting, and that's when the modern flying saucer era began. I thought, well, it's a little less when I got involved in 20 years old. It was going on 20, and I thought, wow, that's going way back. Now here I am, fixing to turn 71. I've been in it for 56 years, and it's like, wow, it's now 70 something years. I just feel.
Did you have to mention those years? I'm 71. But now I'm going to be honest with you. I figured out time doesn't really matter. So if you take 71 and you reverse it, I'm only 17.
Well, there you go. I'm fortunate, still have my health and something left of my mind still. So, I'm able to still engage and communicate. And, as much as I like books and magazines in print, I do like how we can communicate like we are right now through digital technology. And this helps a great deal to be able to reach out and connect with people easier than back in the 60s when I was getting in a telephone booth and putting coins in and trying to call people and stuff and talk for a few minutes.
Yeah, I remember the phone bills back in the 60s and 70s. If you talked to anybody for more than 2-3 minutes, you had a huge bill.
Yeah, I was, warned by my father not to be using the home phone, so I would have to go out somewhere and use a payphone, and have a bunch of coins with me and make calls, and then you have the operator interrupting. Okay, that'll be another 50 cents.
Yeah, and that was about every minute. I had the same problem with my father because I always wanted to be a talk show host. I mean, that's something. I had my amateur license when I was 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I was in CB when I was like 10 years old. And then I got this thing. I started calling up, important people in Hollywood, and they would talk to me. And I remember one day my dad came home and he got the mail. He sat down in his easy chair. He read something. He turned bright red. I was watching TV, but I noticed his face turned red. He goes, "Hey, Can you step into my bedroom for a minute?" Oh, I couldn't sit down for days. I ran up like a $300 and some phone bill back in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
And that was easy to do.
Yes, it was. It was too easy. And, now this is really a blessing to be able to communicate way we do, on Skype and such, and be able to put it on YouTube. And
oh, yeah. Have you ever seen a UFO encounter? Have you had an encounter?
I've seen lights, that were, I thought, peculiar. I've not had the pleasure, although some people have said, "Oh, Brent, this is a scary experience I had," but of not necessarily the occupant, but I'd like to see the dome craft up close where I could maybe throw a rock and hear it ping off it, nuts and bolts. Although, I realize there's a lot of other anomalous stuff that isn't exactly nuts and bolts. I've become quite aware of that. But I've had some unusual experiences in the field since, when I first got involved, I told people I've never had an experience of my own. I just got fascinated by the stories. But after you've been in the field a while, sometimes it comes your way. So
Yeah.
I've had electronic voice phenomena. I've actually had since John Keel passed, gotten John Keel's voice, or someone claiming to be John Keel. Some people who knew John Keel and heard, was familiar with him said, one of those recordings you gave me sounded like John Keel. I knew him and talked with him many times. But it was through, of all things, a ghost box, and I was quite skeptical. But we had some really Class A, very audible things, and we had asked for John Keel, and actually got a response saying John Keel. And one time, John Keel, Brent, and then another voice proceeded afterwards said Bert here, and Bert was I identify him as a psychiatrist that I'd corresponded with for like 37 years, and he had actually been introduced to the UFO field by John Keel because he had appeared on TV talking about some cases that he had investigated, and he planned, people claiming having UFO experiences, but his main field was parapsychology, and he meant for some writings he did for a medical journal on some people who had seen UFOs. He meant that to be his last involvement with the field. But then John Keel contacted him and said, we need people who have experience in parapsychology and know the human mind, consciousness. And so he got dragged into the field, and we became pretty close. I'd met him twice in person, and shared a lot of data. When I was traveling around the country back in the 70s, I would be in touch with him, and he would make suggestions of go to this place and talk to this person, or another location, and I would send him these typewritten reports that I was summarizing some of these people, the details that they shared with me. So that's I've it's that was some pretty anomalous stuff.
I'm sure through the years you got really a lot of interesting stories from people, writing to you, emailing you about, their encounters and stuff like that. I got to ask you a question here because we only are on to 8:00, and we will be back to our normal hours, by the way, next week, because I got some good news today from my medical doctor. So that makes me feel a lot better, so I can do my normal hours on the show. But here's the thing, Men in Black. What's your feeling about Men in Black?
Well, it's like the whole, to me, a lot of other things. It's a complex and very confusing area. There's some very credible cases. Then there's some that you got to kind of wonder about, and then you got to there's some that turn out not to be quite what you thought they were in the beginning. But there are some, like the whole some of them seem almost like they're maybe the government. Some seem like maybe they're actually related to the alien or contact type phenomena, and even I discovered in writing the book on John Keel, who was quite well known for investigating Men in Black phenomena, being quite interested in it, that he claimed to Brad Steiger, and I interviewed Brad Steiger about this, that he had a visit from the Men in Black himself back in the 60s, shortly after getting involved in this research, but he didn't really talk about it. As far as I know, Brad Steiger was the only one that he told this story to, where they just seemed to walk through the door and come into his room, into his apartment in New York City, and tried to intimidate him. And they, they asked him if he'd like to see them demonstrate that they were alien, and he said sure, and they proceeded to reach under the sink, under a cabinet there under the sink in his apartment, and took out a full bottle, I guess, of Clorox, and proceeded to drink it.
Clorox.
Yeah, they passed it around to each other, and all three of them took a swig, and then the other thing that he left out of the Mothman prophecies, but Dan Drazen, a friend of his, going back to 1967. In fact, Dan Drazen was a film producer, and he went down to West Virginia in '67 with Keel, and he went down there about 4 different times and met Mary Hyre, the newspaper reporter for the Athens Messenger, and a number of the witnesses to UFOs and Mothman or whatever. And he had actually witnessed some of these phenomena, the UFO phenomena himself while he was down there. And he was going to do in New York City, there was a television company that was very interested in producing a documentary. And they were all for it. And he even took one of the people from the company with him on, I think, his 4th trip down to West Virginia. The man was very impressed. And then at the very last minute, they pulled the plug for some reason. He never got a reason as to why they did that. But anyway, one of the more mysterious stories that he told me, and I had found out, I was quite surprised when I found this out. And then I found a couple of other people who had told the same story too. But that in December 15th, 1967, Keel was in his apartment. There had been some kind of prediction by a contactee that there was going to be a power blackout. And so he was waiting for that. And instead, it came across the news, a bridge had collapsed in the Ohio River. And he realized, my God, this is sounds like the Silver Bridge that spanned from Point Pleasant across the river. And he had been getting warnings. People were having like precognitive impressions, including Mary Hyre, the reporter, that Christmas packages were floating on the Ohio River. There was some kind of disaster, and they were trying to figure out what it was. And the bridge collapsed, leading to the death of 46 people. And he managed to get a hold of Mary Hyre, the reporter, after trying again and again because the phone circuits were all busy. Finally, I think like 2 o'clock the next morning, and she told Keel that this was just like her dream. The people shouting and screaming, crying, and the Christmas packages floating in the river. And but the thing that he left out of the book was, and he wrote a letter to Dan Drazen later about this, which he shared the letter that Keel had written him, was that for several hours that day, he had a friend who visited him. He was his best man at his this friend's wedding back in 1950. So they'd known each other a number of years, but they'd kind of drifted apart. And just that very day, he'd come by earlier, and they went to lunch. They even went to a Jim Moseley talk downtown Manhattan, which Jim Moseley, of course, is a well-known UFO figure in the field, and also was in the apartment that night. So Dan Drazen met him. He said he was a big guy with large hands. They shook hands, and then later on, Keel meets the man's wife in Macy's, and he says, "Oh, I saw your husband a while back," and she says, "Johnny, he passed away." And he says, "Oh, what happened? A heart attack?" And asked when it happened, and she said it was in July of 1965. And he says, "No, that can't be right." And she says, "What do you mean?" She says, "I just saw him in, December 1967." And he says, "You must be mistaken." And she says, "John, I was there for the whole ordeal. I know I know what I'm talking about. It was July 1965. You know, it must have been somebody else. And Keel described in his letter to Dan Drazen that he said, this whole thing has really bugged me. I've had many sleepless nights on account of it. The guy had my friend's memories. We talked about old times, everything. I mean, it was, how could this be, you know? So, and then he told essentially the same story to Tim and John Frick, who are kind of 14 type researchers who attended the 2003 Mothman Festival in September of 2003, and had about 8 hours they spent with Keel talking about different things, and that particular story came up. But some other people that were close friends, he never told that story to, like a friend of his named Doug Skinner, who now posts a lot of John Keel's magazine articles, photos, and letters and things at a website called johnkeel.com. And, Keel passed away in July 3rd of 2009. He was about 79, I believe. And anyway, the ghost box thing with the electronic voice phenomena saying John Keel, it started, we were getting it at different sites, myself and a friend who was an alien abductee, who was telling me how to use it, how he used it. It's like a Radio Shack digital radio, AM, FM, put it on continuous scan. He always uses the AM frequency, and it works. That seems to work best for him, and it does for me as well. And so we got John Keel while we were on a number of our investigations at haunted sites. And so July 3rd of 2010, which had been the 1 year anniversary of Keel's passing, we were at another abductee friend's house, Thompson Station, below Nashville. And I suggested, let's try to reach out to John Keel. And, I was skeptical. I thought, well, could somebody be playing a trick on me? Could somebody be somewhere with a radio that's transmitting on this frequency? And we did about 2 different sessions that night. And Brett asked, and we recorded them, I think on 3 different recorders, and asked, can John Keel say his name? And immediately we got a male voice saying John Keel. And he asked, what does John Keel think about Bigfoot? And this voice said, Smuck Bigfoot, see? And it was just a bunch of things like that. I mean, any skepticism I had at that point was kind of hard to follow. And then I got my own radio from Radio Shack. My son-in-law fixed it up where I can put it on continuous scan. The theory being that the white noise between the stations, the spirits can speak through the white noise. And, I was getting things here in my own home, just me, my wife, and sometimes my daughter Chandra, intelligent, interactive responses. And one of the tech guides or spirit guides, whatever you want to call them, that would assist in these programs that Brett used was called Bishop. And now he comes through. Whenever I ask who's there, I'll often get Bishop as well as someone named Philip.
Did it, when this started first happening, when you had the first experience with it, did it make you nervous? I mean, were you scared?
Actually, no, neither my wife nor daughter. I know that I've been asked that question before. In fact, we played some of the audio on a Canadian station one time, and the guy says, "This just gives me the shivers. Doesn't this scare you?" And I said, oddly, I don't know, it's coming through a radio, and for some reason, it just seems kind of natural in a way. I know that, but no, it hadn't scared me. Of course, I'm really skeptical as to where this is coming from. I know, we got some really good audio saying these things. There's one lady who told me that I don't usually deal with this kind of stuff, but some of your your audio is just such a class A audio, very clear, that I counted as communication, you know. And she's written a book called How to Talk to Aliens. Nancy DeTortry is her name, which came out in 2015. And she was, you know, quite impressed by some of this audio we had. And of course, people can use it to contact spirits, or you can use this process and communicate with aliens, or, you know. And of course, you don't really know for sure who you're talking to. It's like,
well, you could be talking to the devil too. You know that.
Well, yeah, you could go that route, or, you know, it's kind of like what the Native Americans would call kind of the trickster phenomena. You know, you can get some information that seems useful, but you just keep, you know, you're never really sure the source. You just and we'd always, you know, before we started the session, we'd ask that all that comes through would be to our highest good, and nothing negative come through or whatever. But there were times that we picked up some cuss words, and that didn't sound like anything that was coming to a regular AM.
No, I don't know
channel,
I don't know many radio stations, you know, would allow that on the air, because I tell you, the fines can get really, really big. Trust me, I know that. I want to step back a little bit to the Men in Black. You know, again, a lot of people who report the Men in Black people, they drive up in an old vehicle. It looks brand new. They're dressed, you know, like the beatnik era, you know, in the early 60s. They're kind of like the sunglasses, the hat, the dark clothes and stuff like that. And my mind kind of wonders, well, maybe because it takes a long time for a TV signal to travel out to space, maybe some of these ETs, by the time they get our videos, right, from who knows, like Beretta, that TV show and all that stuff, the time they get the signals, right, mm-hmm. When they come to Earth to visit or to do, they dress what they think that we are dressed like. And the problem is, it could be 30 years out of style.
Yeah, I remember one ufologist telling me that he speculated that they have a whole closet full of all kinds of costumes, and they just, when they, you know, he also felt they were time travelers. And when they get to a certain place, they select the outfit that they think best suits the occasion or whatever. And it's always, you know, cleaned and pressed and everything, looks sharp. and some people have reported, you know, like in some reports, cars coming out of the UFOs that landed. So I don't know.
As long as it's not a 1957 Edsel, I'll tell you that.
Well, I don't know.
Well, you know, I had a guy email me the other day. He said, "Hey, Gary, I'm going to be honest with you. People are so naive." He said that we're all aliens on this planet. So when people say that they're ETs walking around on our planet, he said that we're all ETs.
Yeah, we're all made up of all the stuff from the Big Bang, whatever. I mean, we're made up of the cosmic materials, the dust or whatever. And who's to say? We are part of all this. And Edgar Mitchell, when he was coming back from his mission to the moon in 1971, had this experience where he felt like suddenly, you know, the ship himself was all made up of this material, and we were all one. You know, it was kind of like a cosmic consciousness experience that he had at the time. And for him, it was quite profound. And for 2 years afterwards, he was going around meeting with scientists and holy men and shamans and people trying to get their take on what such experiences meant. You know, he'd never really thought that much about it. Or, you know, he found it hard to find any literature to really address it. And of course, later he founded an organization, the Noetic Institute of Science, you know, to address parapsychology and things. For a while there, he was traveling around different institutes, studying people like Uri Geller and children who could mimic Geller. There were stories of a lot of children coming out after seeing him on TV and bending spoons and forks himself, and he was going around with new silverware, testing some of these children. And I interviewed a reporter from the National Enquirer who accompanied him on a lot of his investigations into parapsychology back in the 70s. And he was also, of course, interested in UFOs, very much so.
Now, what is your feeling? There's different opinions out here that, some ETs are friendly. Some ETs are not friendly towards human because, we had all that cattle mutilation in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And then how about human abductions, where, again, there was even some reports of human mutilations on top of it. What's your feedback about ETs?
Well, a lot of what has, I think a lot of what happens with contact is the interactive intelligence. I think it kind of conforms to our expectations. John Keel and Jacques Vallée both wrote in some of their books about Fatima, Portugal, back in 1917, 70,000 people seeing the dance of the sun, this big spinning disc in the sky, and attributing it to a religious miracle. But in reality, they said it also sounded very much like a close encounter, and potentially 70,000 people gathered to witness something like that. Quite the spectacle. So if these things actually appear and conform to our expectations, then a lot of times what we get is things that conform to our perspective and our culture, our belief systems. And now we hear more about things that are based on our sciences and our speculations and extraterrestrial life and, what's out there, the questions, and here come the answers. And, we also got a lot of, similar phenomena going on in pre-1947, where these things seem to, confirm belief systems to them back then. Even little people like Jacques Vallée's Passport to Magonia back in 1969 with, the comparisons of the fairy faith in different cultures. To them, there was underworld beings who could appear and could create missing time and leave circles on the ground and the kind of things we associate with spaceships and aliens now. And I think there's a lot of comparisons, and I think we need a lot of multidisciplinary perspective. Like if a ufologist goes out and investigates, say, a recent UFO landing or something, and say the witness says, "Oh, and last week I had a Bigfoot run across my backyard." In the past, a lot of the investigators would say, "Well, that's not my field. I'm just here for the UFO." Instead of taking all the information, anything they say that's anomalous, and sharing it with, the organizations, the public. And, Keel was one who pointed out when he went around investigating that there were a lot of things that were happening that were really not popular with the mainstream. I mean, at the time in the 60s, the mutilation certainly wasn't. The contact experiences weren't. A lot of ufologists wanted reports of flying discs or cigar-shaped craft, but they didn't want anything to do with an occupant. Right. And they didn't want anything to do with missing time. And he was coming across these cases in his field work and correspondence with people, and he was quite open to it. Of course, it took for mainstream ufology to really start taking it really serious was after Bud Hopkins and Whitley Strieber came out, Intruders and Communion, and then all these support centers developed to help people, because they each heard from thousands of people, that had claimed they had these experiences. Keel had written an article back in the 60s, and afterwards the editor called him to his office, and Keel says, "What do you need?" And he says, "I need you to remove those 5 or 6 bags he had in the corner filled with mail," because he had written an article for their magazine on occupant sightings, which a lot of writers weren't really covering back at that time. People of the mainstream of ufology. The National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena did not want anything with occupants because they were very opposed to the contactee phenomena. It just sounded too ridiculous to them. And of course, there were a lot of far out people in that movement. But it also closed off a lot of potential people who did have encounters. So they, I think it was the Betty and Barney Hill case that finally kind of opened that door a little for them.
I think it did, Brett. But another thing, a friend of mine, Art Bell, when Art Bell had his radio show, talking about this type of stuff, it kind of made it where you could talk about it. Because I remember back before, back in the 70s or even the early 80s, if you said, "I saw a UFO," and you told that to somebody, they would look at you like, "What hospital did you just get out of?" I mean, people would back up. Seriously, they would back up when you say, "Well, I saw a UFO," or "I saw this." The people look at you like you're strange. And then, shows like, Coast to Coast, Art Bell, made it a house where, where you could talk about it. And that really opened up, I think, the field for you and everybody else in it. I really do.
Well, I know that when I started, I worked from 1984, or let's see, 84, 85 to 2014, working in a state prison as a warehouse person and a working commissary. And I tried to just go in and do my job, not tell about my interest, because I'd had experiences where, that didn't go too well in your workplace. And there were people always who wanted to make fun of you because of these interests you have. But eventually it gets out, and the X-Files, people were talking about the X-Files too. And it was generating conversation. And then these documentaries come out, paranormal, UFOs, they had the UFO hunters, and people would ask me, "Hey, what's this? What about Roswell? What about this and that?" And suddenly, before I left, they had a prison paper. It was, and they wanted me to write articles, Raynes and things, come out once a month. So I did that. Even after I retired in 2014, they wanted me to still send articles in, until they finally dissolved the paper, But I thought, wow, what a change from when I first started, and I was trying to keep, silent about my interests and just go in and do my job, to suddenly, in fact, one corporal who worked in the mailroom contacted me about the, 2 houses that she knew of that were haunted, and how we needed to investigate it. So I got some of my friends from up around Nashville to come down, and we conduct investigation. And that was one of the places we first got John Keel coming through twice on the ghost box, and also there was an article. It was actually one of Ivan Sanderson's book. Ivan Sanderson was a very good friend of John Keel, a zoologist who had written a book on the abominable snowman, and another one on UFOs with underwater bases. And he had also, in one of his books, written about this place in Clifton, Tennessee, where there was an underground fire. And one of the haunted houses we were investigating happened to be where this man lived. And I was told by a news lady who lived in Clifton for years and would write for the local Wayne County News, kind of the local stories about Clifton, that she kept quiet about it for a long time, but this underground fire lasted for about 7 years. And she said she had seen some UFO activity down there. So, it's kind of interesting. One of the things that on that investigation where we got John Keel twice, Brett Oldham, who's also an alien abductee, has now written 2 books on his experiences. Children of the Greys was one of them, and Baby Takers was another. And he asked about Bigfoot, because one of the people there claimed they had seen Bigfoot, wouldn't you know it, and or what looked like Bigfoot, with a couple of his friends. They were out hunting. And so he says, "What can you tell us about Bigfoot?" And a voice came through and said, "Monsters." And next time I saw Brett, I says, "Look, Brett, we got John Keel, and you asked about Bigfoot, but we got monsters instead. Here's the first letter John Keel wrote to me. Right here," he says, he's writing a book on an encyclopedia on monsters. And that book was Strange Creatures from Time and Space. And when it came out, the very first chapter, talking about monsters. He didn't call them cryptids or Bigfoot or, any of that. He just talked about monsters. They could have been, lake serpents. They could have been Nessie. They could have been Mothman. They could have been. But, instead of saying cryptids, he just called these things monsters. And it was just things like that told me, yeah, this is some sort of interactive intelligence, whether it's John Keel or not. It somehow there's coming through information that suggests that it knows what I'm looking for, and it has an intelligent, interactive ability. And in fact, the first time that we got John Keel, I didn't tell anybody that I was trying to reach him. I kept it to myself. And then later, I found on the audio, at that time it was Keel, Johnny, and it was supposed to be where Brett was trying to ask for my wife's brother to come through, and instead we got this Keel, Johnny. So, and then it sounded like it was an argument, and I can only speculate that was supposed to be her brother arguing with Keel that, hey, this isn't fair, blah, blah. It sounded like there was a cuss word. And I said, you think that your brother could have, does that sound like him and could have used that kind of language? And so, well, I never heard him say that, but yeah, he maybe so in this case.
Interesting. Now, because our time has gone by so fast, you know that. We had Dr. Greer on last week, and he said TikTok, for example, he feels that those weren't off-world, devices. He thought they were ours, man-made. What is your feeling on a lot of these reports on UFOs? Do you think a lot of them could be man-made, that we have, technology that could take us to the stars?
There's a lot, we have all these things now that we have to really be on the alert for. We have drone technology that can, you can have a number of drones, and it can have a computer program that causes them to go into different formations and do all these things. And, years ago, that kind of display would have been automatically UFOs flying around and taking up different formations. I've watched video where they can use them like we use for the 4th of July, going up and creating the American flag,
Mm-hmm.
and other things in the air. And, you have to, there is technology out there that, of course, there are these flying triangles or whatever, and some of that sounds like things that the military is up flying around over sometimes populated areas, and yet some of that, the way that it's described, sounds again like that doesn't sound like anything we have, but it's good to log that information and see how we come out with it. Back during World War II, we had the Foo Fighters, and they were appearing to us, and we thought maybe they were secret monitoring devices or something. And then the other side, we found out after the war was over, was thinking the same thing, that maybe they were our devices, and we never did figure out, if they weren't a natural phenomenon of some kind, and who is responsible for them, And it's kind of that way today. We see these things, like Carl Jung. My friend Dr. Greg Little always likes to quote Carl Jung when he was studying UFOs, the late great Swiss psychologist, and he wrote the last book he wrote was on the flying saucer phenomenon. And he said, something is seen, we know not what, he wanted to try to attribute it to archetypes of the collective unconscious, a neat, tidy little package. But as often happens, they've been tracked on radar and at the same time that maybe pilots were pursuing them. So it's kind of hard to fit them in a secure frame of reference, and of course now with technology becoming as advanced as it is now, it makes it all the harder. But
yeah, hey, Brett,
there's still some things out there that's pretty enigmatic, the way it operates, and still doesn't sound quite like anything we know of that's man-made.
Yeah,
but,
Brett, we're out of time, Brett. Again, how can they get a hold of your magazine? Do you have a website you can share?
Yes, apmagazine.info, and people can write me at Brent Raynes, BrentRaynes is one word, at yahoo.com. And also on Facebook, I'm listed as Brent Raynes, and also I have a alternate perceptions page also.
Okay, my friend. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Well, thank you, Gary, for the invitation. I sure appreciate it and enjoyed chatting with you.
Okay, my friend. You have a great weekend. It's coming up real fast.
All right. You too. Take care.
You take care. Well, James, it seems like tomorrow we got a fantastic show, aren't we? We're going to talk about 70 plus ETs that are coming. Can you say anything more about that?
Yes. As a matter of fact, our guest is going to be Andrew Bashago, the time-traveling lawyer. He's going to be on talking about these different ETs that have been coming here, but there's 4 main ones, too, that have been coming here for, well, maybe a millennia or longer, so that's what we're going to be talking about.
And then who do we have on Friday?
Oh, Friday, Nick Vellante, my buddy's coming back on talking about scary cryptids and dogman reports that he gets. And listen, he is boots on the ground. He's not one of those keyboard warriors. He's there in person. He interviews these people, goes out in the woods, so he's got some good stuff.
And on Sunday, we got a abductee and somebody who, actually hypnotizes abductees.
Well, yeah, Sunday we have Mike Beaver on. He's been abducted. He helps other abductees to get through, because it's very, very trying. It's very emotional. They're taking some people. So, yeah, he helps those, and he's going to be talking about that.
Well, again, check out our website at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. I notice the numbers have been going up on that. I know that even the days we're not on the air, I noticed on the apps, huge amount of people listening to past shows. So I think we're on a climb like you wouldn't believe. Well, till tomorrow, everybody have a good one, and we'll talk to you on the other side of the campground tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Pacific West Coast time, 10 p.m. Eastern time.
The Disclosure 2.0 Conference in Washington, D.C. with the National Press Club event is June 10th through June 12th. Dr. Greer will share explosive witness testimony and analysis with a call for the government to open up all files on the UFO issue and get to the bottom of the secrecy. For more information on the Disclosure 2.0 Conference, go to this website, www.seriousdisclosure.com.
I got burning feet from hard asphalt. A voice within me tells me don't go home. So I run until my feet give out. I jump a little higher to clear the ground. Every shadow